Prime Minister Modi takes to the driver's seat to put the economy on the fast lane in a no-holds-barred attack against doomsayers. Modi says a surge in automobile sales, higher FDI flows and steep rise in air travel are all pointers to a bounce back in the economy. Also defends big-ticket reforms like demonetization and GST, even as he hints at bolder steps. The central bank won't walk along with the government in propping the economy. RBI's Monetary Policy Committee keeps benchmark interest rates unchanged, even as it raises the red flag over the rise in consumer inflation. Also trims growth forecasts, citing the slowdown in demand. Industry and markets not really amused. Suspense over the new SBI chief comes to an end. Government appoints current MD Rajneesh Kumar as the chairman of the country's largest bank for a 3-year term. Kumar, who joined SBI as a probationary officer in 1980, will take over the reins from outgoing chairman Arundhati Bhattacharya's term comes to an end later this week. Rahul Gandhi takes a swipe at Prime Minister Modi yet again in his first visit to his constituency Amethi since a drubbing in UP. The Congress Vice President says the PM has mastered the art of changing nomenclature of UPA government's flagship programs. Also says reckless implementation of big-ticket reforms is leading to collateral damage. Rush of BJP national leaders in southernmost state of Kerala following the footsteps of party President Amit Shah. It is now the turn of Yogi Adityanath to join the rally against the killings of RSS workers. UP Chief Minister launches an all-out attack against the Pinarayi government for sponsoring what he called jihadi terrorism. Karti Chidambaram moves the Supreme Court against the CBI summons in the Aircel Maxis case. Former Finance Minister's son accuses the CBI of harassing him and his family members over false and malafide charges. Also urges investigating agency not to press for his personal appearance. Days after India called Pakistan's bluff at the UN, Washington rallies behind New Delhi. US Defense Secretary accuses Pakistan's ICSI of having ties with global terror groups. Also warns of revoking Pakistan's status as a major non-NATO ally if it fails to rein in terror. Good evening, you're with ET now. This is the India development debate. Who's afraid of a slowdown? Not the Prime Minister of the country for sure. Coming down heavily on doomsayers, PM Modi today asserted that a small blip in GDP growth in one quarter doesn't mean that all is lost, launching an all-out attack against his critics, both from the opposition camp and from within the party fold. He said the surge in automobile sales, higher air traffic, and the steady flow of foreign direct investments are all pointers to a bounce back in the economy. Strongly defending the switch to GST, Modi said nearly 19 lakh new taxpayers have come into the fold due to this single reform. The government is ready to pay premium for honesty, says the Prime Minister, and hinted that bolder reforms may be in the works. He also slammed the previous UPA government, saying that India was in the fragile 5 nations when so many economists were guarding the fiscs. So what does the Prime Minister's sudden shift to the offensive imply? Are these pointers to a big bang QE-type stimulus package? Is fiscal fundamentalism giving way to pragmatic economics? More importantly, is Modi taking charge of the economy at a time when his most trusted lieutenant, FM Arun Jaitley, is facing the heat for the so-called mismanagement of the fisc?
कुछ लोगों को निराशा फैलाने में बड़ा आनंद आता है, अद्भुत आनंद। उनको रात को बहुत अच्छी नींद आती है। और ऐसे लोगों के लिए आजकल एक क्वार्टर की ग्रोथ कम होना जैसे सबसे बड़ा खुराक मिल गया है। करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट में ग्रोथ पर चर्चा प्रमुख रहती थी। रुपए के मुकाबले डॉलर की कीमत में ग्रोथ होने पर अखबारों में हेडलाइन की खबरें बना करती थी। ये सभी पैरामीटर्स तब कुछ लोगों को पसंद आते थे। अब जब वही पैरामीटर्स सुधरे हैं, विकास को सही दिशा मिली है, तो ऐसे कुछ लोगों ने आंखों पर पर्दा डाल दिया है। आप क्या कहेंगे जब आपको पता चलेगा कि जून के बाद कॉमर्शियल गाड़ियों की बिक्री में 23% से ज्यादा वृद्धि हुई है। आज विदेशी इन्वेस्टर्स भारत में रिकॉर्ड निवेश कर रहे हैं। भारत का फॉरेन एक्सचेंज रिजर्व लगभग 30,000 करोड़ डॉलर से बढ़कर 40,000 करोड़ डॉलर के पार कर गया है।
Joining us on the India development debate this evening, we've got Priyanka Chaturvedi of the Congress, Narendra Taneja of the BJP, and our three experts on the show today are, of course, Maithili Busnumat, consulting editor, R. Jagannathan, senior journalist, editorial director of Swaraj magazine, and Anand Narayan, money market expert, joining in with me in the studio here in Mumbai. I'm going to start off with the politicians first. So, Narendra Taneja, this is coming your way. You know, I get the point on not spreading gloom and doom, and frankly, that's completely unwarranted. I think it's not going to do anyone any good. So, we welcome the move of the Prime Minister and trying to talk up the economy and trying to change the sentiment. All that is well taken. But is the government in denial? 6 consecutive quarters of declining growth. Is the government in denial?
You see, the government, first of all, is a kind of manufactured narrative that, you know, some people, especially led by the Congress party, they're trying to sell it internally in the country, and now they've started actually trying to sell even to overseas investor. That their leaders are traveling all over the world and trying to sell this narrative so that investment stops coming to India, and domestic investors also, they kind of get into some kind of panic and stop investing in the country, and they'll start looking at investment opportunities overseas. So the message of the Prime Minister is very simple. If you don't like our face, it's okay. If you don't like the face of the Prime Minister, even that is okay. You don't like the color of BJP, that's okay. But please don't do anything and don't say anything which will basically mean that India's economic security, India's economic prospects, India's economic future, all these things are compromised. Play politics by all means. We are very happy to do it with you. And what they're trying to do is every day they just come out with things and criticism. Criticism is fine, but where is the Congress party's narratives? What exactly they want to say? And Prime Minister today has come out with slides for everything. And if the Congress really wants to offer any kind of criticism or for that matter suggestion, let's go slide by slide. These are facts that the Prime Minister shared with the country and with the the global audience at large.
Okay.
Number two, the important thing is all the data that Prime Minister has given in terms of GDP. To answer your question also, it's not a lie. Prime Minister has explained even in the past, in certain quarters, the GDP has actually dipped to even less than 1.5%. Prime Minister talked about it. So Prime Minister was speaking with facts and figures, and Congress need to answer with facts and figures.
Okay, fair enough. But, I'm going to come to the Congress in just a bit. But, one could argue and say, Narendra Taneja, that when the UPA was in power, you didn't hesitate in pointing out that there was policy paralysis in this economy. So, at that point also, probably the BJP should have thought of what damage it's doing to the economy. But let's leave that aside. Jaggi, let me come to you. How do you read this fiery speech? In my view, it was long overdue. I'm glad the Prime Minister came and sort of, talked up the economy, tried to change the sentiment, tried to get some sort of control over the narrative. I almost felt as if this government has lost the economic narrative when he made a concerted pitch. How do you read, this fiery speech, this fiery retort of the Prime Minister this evening, Jaggi?
I think this was the kind of speech that a Prime Minister ought to make. It is an indirect acknowledgement that there are problems, but it is also trying to paint the glass as half full. And no need for you to say that there is going to be complete gloom or something like that, and that there have been bad patches in the past and this may be a bad patch now, though I don't want to say it in those as many words. And I think he's trying to talk up the market, I don't mean the stock market, but talk up the sentiment so that when the sentiment is down, you can actually make it a self-fulfilling proposition. So he's trying to make sure that the mood and the sentiment is not the way the opposition would like to create it, that it is all gloom, everything is collapsing and the world is a shambles and India is in a bigger mess. I think that is not the narrative he wants. And when the weather conditions are different, you have to send your best batsman. And that's exactly what the Prime Minister and the BJP have done. Modi is the best batsman for the BJP, and he has come out into the pitch to take on the bowling from the opposition.
Okay, they've put the best foot forward and sent the best batsman, though, one still waiting for the fours and sixes, as one would say in cricket parlance. But, before we're trying to get that line through with Priyanka Chaturvedi, Maithili, I'm coming to you. The fact is that while, we welcome this move of the Prime Minister, much of it was sort of comparing the performance of this government with that of the UPA government. Now, the UPA government was rejected by the people of this country for poor, what I would like to believe, for poor economic management. And so therefore, is that a benchmark that the government 3 years into office needs to compare itself with?
Sandeep, I'm not sure that economic prowess alone is the only yardstick by which Indian electorate votes. The fact is that in a country as complex as ours, there are numerous factors on the basis of which people vote. Corruption, I think, was a big issue with the UPA government, and that possibly was a factor, as also caste, religion, ethnicity, a whole host of things. Of course, economic performance would also have been a factor. But the fact is that, one cannot deny that the Prime Minister is a past master in the art of public speaking. So certainly it was a fiery speech, it was a very charismatic speech, but he was also a little selective on his facts. Because though it is true that during the UPA regime, GDP growth might have dipped to less than 5.7%, the fact is that it was a different yardstick altogether, because it is only post 11-12 that we've shifted to a new base year. So one cannot really compare the UPA's performance during the UPA regime earlier to the BJP's performance at the moment. It is true that in the year 12-13, GDP growth was only 5.5. So 5.7 for a single quarter is better than the annual rate of 5.5. But it's every government, whether it is the UPA or whether it is the BJP, builds on the successes and the failures of the previous government. It is not as if these are discrete achievements. So certainly this government has attempted a great deal of structural reform, which the Congress party really did not. It has paid the price for it, but whether this is a short-term pain for a medium to long-term gain, it will still have to be seen. So I think that is the perspective from which we have to see it. The Prime Minister put up a very fierce defense of the BJP government's performance, but whether final facts will show that it was worth the price that is being paid in the short term, the jury is still out. We'll have to wait and see.
Okay. I'm going to come to Anand Narayan then and get his initial view. Anand, what's your own sense? Are we obsessing too much over this 1 quarter number? Because that's a point that the Prime Minister, the larger point that he was trying to make, almost indicating as if where is the slowdown? Don't obsess over a 1 quarter number. And he did point out to certain, hard facts. The fact that we've seen our core sector revive, the fact that we've seen, CV sales go up by 23%, 24% jump in air passenger traffic, indicating that these wouldn't have been there if there was a structural slowdown in the economy. What's your own view? Is this a transitory 1 quarter blip, or is this a structural slowdown that we're seeing, Anand?
Look, Sandeep, every country which implements GST has seen an initial dip in GDP. I think without exception, GDP growth has come off as the system kind of resets and gets used to the new way of doing business. So India, by that yardstick, is no exception. Yes, it is a matter of worry that for several quarters now, even before the first quarter of GST implementation, we have seen softer GDP numbers coming out. I think the good thing out of this entire debate is that the fact that we are debating so much on the economy and trying to figure out what are the areas within the economy which require some focus is coming to sharp focus. I think that's the good part. Now, what we need to watch out for is there are some transitory issues which can be sorted out quickly. At the same time, there are some long-term issues as well which require a deeper thought. Clearly, the implementation of GST will require quick fixes. And the good news is the GST Council and the highest echelons of the government is showing interest in bringing those quick fixes as quickly as possible. The deeper issues which I think we need to sort out as we go along is a few critical issues like banking health. Where do the banks get the capital from so that they can fund the next investment cycle? Right. We all know that for all of us as Indians, we require an investment cycle to come back with focus on education, with focus on water, with focus on reviving housing, on getting employment back in focus. That's not happening as yet from the private sector. Yes, the government is doing what it can from the fiscal side. So do we have the infrastructure in place to see that cycle pick up? it's not yet in place. So I think the debate has to be on how do we get the conditions right for the next investment cycle to come out. So the good news is the debate has started in right earnest, both within the government and within the whole ecosystem of stakeholders. Hopefully answers will emerge, and I do think answers do exist. We have all the ingredients in place to make this country where it deserves to be.
Okay, the fact that we are talking about it is itself a significant move forward, and there are solutions to some of these structural problems, and hopefully we'll touch upon some of them in the course of this program. But Narendra Taneja, the point that I was asking Maithili as well, the Prime Minister kept referring to, the poor performance of the UPA government, but why is the government still benchmarking itself to the performance of the UPA government? UPA did not have 281 seats in the Lok Sabha, and UPA, and this government claimed to have a political capital, a strong leadership, strong Prime Minister. How can, the benchmark still be that of the UPA, Narendra Taneja?
Very simple, because it's the Congress party which is manufactured and is driving this narrative. And media has fallen, into it. The Congress party started it, and they are going all over the world and doing it. And Congress party led the UPA 1 and UPA 2. So naturally, we have to refer to UPA 1 and UPA 2. We have to also show the mirror at the same time. We all know that UPA 1 and UPA 2, in particular, was all about scam and scandal and everything. And now we attack corruption. We have carried out, 2 major reforms, demonetization and GST. And at the same time, when you look at India's economy, the whole pyramid, we saw these cancer cells at the very bottom. We attacked the cells, and therefore the economy fundamentally and structurally is in a much better shape today. The whole world is talking about it at the same time. But if you really want to look at overall health of India's economy, only, in the context of 90 days, that is 1 quarter, that's up to you. But look at all parameters. That's important. Look at all parameters. Foreign exchange reserves, FDI, India's image as an investment destination, traffic at airports, go to restaurants, go to hotels, you go anywhere. And you see not only this thing, crowd everywhere, you don't see, practically all places sold out, you also see smile on the face of the people. So that's why Prime Minister, Congress is also creating, there are no jobs created. They pick up data only from one department, there are no jobs even created. They don't even talk about the states being ruled by the Congress party like Karnataka and Punjab. So that's why Prime Minister talked about the mudra, because we don't promise sarkari naukri to everybody. We are promoting entrepreneurship at the same time. That's why Prime Minister said in total we have distributed, the amount of money close to 4 lakh crore. And at the same time, the people have taken the loans are in the region of 9 crore. And these people have not taken loans just to go and have picnic. They have taken loans because they want to do something, and they are doing it. So that's the reference to UPA and the Congress party, and reference to their narrative which they're trying to sell, that there are no jobs being created.
Okay. Jaggi, how are you going to respond to that comment coming there from Narendra Taneja that, wherever you go, you see smiles on the faces of the people? Is the government, look, we've ourselves been, you are sort of, you know it more than anyone else, Jaggi. You've been a part of some of these debates where we're saying this sort of gloom and doom narrative is sort of ridiculous, and, we need to sort of be more result oriented, focus more on solutions, and so that's, and I'm not taking anything away from that. But, do you get a sense that, that they're out of sync with the mood in the ground, that the fact that there is still a lot of informal sector that's under stress in the back of demonetization and GST, that jobs are not being created at the pace at which they should be. We were creating 10 lakh odd jobs at the time of the UPA government. We're creating 1/10 of that right now. Or do you think this is a counter narrative that's being spread to sort of see if the sentiment can change in the economy, which probably may not be a bad idea?
No, the importance of improving the sentiment cannot be gainsaid. It has to be done. But that does not mean that you ignore the problems that exist. And I think the 2 fundamental areas where the government should and could have done much better was in the lifeblood of commerce, which is money. If you do not fix the banks, and you have taken more than 3 years to fix the banks, that is the one big failure that's actually holding back the India growth story. By now, we should have been back in 7 or 8% growth, but now we have to probably wait another 6 or 9 months before that happens again. We start resolving the bag loans. Second thing is, on the jobs front, the government has not fully come to grips with the reality. The economy is incapable of creating high level of jobs no matter what the growth rate. This is because of automation and lack of reform in labor sector and other things. So what you are actually seeing is that jobs in the formal sector are not growing at the rate that they ought to grow. So you are giving an
Okay, I think we've just lost that link with Jaggi. We'll connect back to him, but good time to welcome Priyanka Chaturvedi into the debate. Priyanka, we had Narendra Taneja of the BJP make a spirited defense of the Prime Minister's speech. Simple question based on what the Prime Minister said. He says GDP fell below 5.7% on 8 instances of the UPA government. Why are you creating a fuss right now? Why is the Congress spreading this narrative of gloom and doom? And to add to that, Narendra Taneja says that, that there is no gloom and doom, that wherever you go, sort of people are happy and smiling. So therefore, what is all this narrative of gloom and doom that he says the Congress is spreading? Priyanka Chaturvedi.
So firstly, let's not talk about the GDP growth rate as 5.7%. If we look as per the old calculation, it is at 3.7%. It stands at 3.7%. And 3.7, I don't think India has ever touched the low of 3.7%. The Prime Minister spoke about 8 such instances where the GDP fell. He forgets to mention that India went through a crisis which the world was facing, the economic crisis of 2008, where lots of countries had a almost economic collapse, yet we continued to ensure that India kept growing. We kept India insulated because of our policies to ensure that the growth rate wasn't harmed. And even Mr. Chidambaram in his column has categorically mentioned this, that we came to a percentage growth rate of 6.4, and that is how we left the economy. And it was only to go upward simply because you had a government in power which was the single largest party majority. First time in 30 years in India that we saw a single largest party majority government. Expected it to come up with structural reforms that would ensure the growth rate reaches double digit, and that was a promise that Mr. Modi had made when he was seeking votes. A promise that he also made to the people of the country was 2 crore jobs per annum. Unfortunately, we lost 1.5 million jobs after demonetization. Manufacturing has lost more than 50% jobs, and even the RBI governor in his speech today mentioned that it is a cause for worry, the manufacturing growth rate falling. So these are indicators which you cannot simply ignore to make your political points. And as far as the growth rate is concerned, job growth is concerned, we only see every day you pick up any newspaper, it shows you the job losses and job cuts expected in the future. 30,000 youngsters come out in the job market every day, and we are able to provide them only 450 jobs is a cause of concern. And every time the Prime Minister speaks about FDI, let's not forget FDI is just 2% of the GDP component in our country. Agriculture is almost 18%, services is 50%, and industries is 30%. So when we look at 30% industries also growing slowly, showing a negative growth rate, and these are not figures that I am coming up with or the Congress has made up. These are economic indicators available for everyone to see. And even if you look at economists, even Mr. Surjit Bhalla, who happens to be an economist who is pro the Bharatiya Janata Party, says the growth rate, the slow growth rate that we are seeing, the BJP, the quarters that we are seeing is worse than the worst 3 quarters of the UPA government. So it is an indictment of this government, and as much as they might want to ignore it, as much as they might want to hide behind political correctness, it is not going away, and it's a challenge they need to face and be able to accept that some of their policies went against the economy of the country. This is something that they need to accept and move on from here.
Okay, fair enough. Narendra, I'm going to let you come in before I take it to my experts on the panel. Narendra, very quickly counter to the points that Priyanka Chaturvedi made. It's not 5.7, it's actually 3.7%. It's not Maithili pointing it out, it's not Priyanka Chaturvedi pointing it out, it's Yashwant Sinha who pointed it out a week ago that it was actually technically, if you look at it, it's 3.7%. And to the other points that Priyanka Chaturvedi is making on where are you as far as the promises that you made to the electorate of this country when you came to power in 2014.
Well, how GDP is calculated, you see, and who basically came up with that? So entire thing 5.7 is based on something, the formula, the calculation and the platform that was created by UPA too. So they're questioning their own thing. They're actually questioning their own achievement, an achievement of Dr. Manmohan Singh. That's what they are doing. If they would want to do it, question Dr. Manmohan Singh, is up to them. As far as you see Mr. Chidambaram thing is concerned, the entire country know. We don't have, such a short memory. We know the country was known for only one thing, that was policy paralysis. Have you forgotten that? Policy paralysis? The entire world was talking about, there was nothing happening in the country. You see, and as far as the Mr. Chidambaram, when he left the finance ministry, do you know one thing? Everybody knows it. Ask anybody, even a junior official in the Ministry of Finance. He left under the carpet a bill of 40,000 crores. And look at what was the state of the company like Indian Oil and ONGC at that time. The subsidy bill and all that. We have cleaned that up. Go for an impartial inquiry and you will know the job that we have done. The 40,000 crore bill also that he left behind, we have cleared it now. And as far as you see, manufacturing, because it's important to understand that manufacturing the world over is going through a transition. Manufacturing we used to know in 1860 was not there in 1940.
No,
manufacturing as we used to know 10 years ago is going through the transition. World over, artificial intelligence, robotics and all that is changing the pace. That is the reason
we don't need a lesson. We don't need a lecture in
entrepreneurship.
artificial intelligence
And
right
when
now.
you look at, that's why I say people have a smile on the face, because country is going through major transition.
Can I just get 30 seconds to counter this?
Okay, sure, Priyanka, go ahead. 30 seconds. I need to go to my panel.
30 seconds, please. 30
Sure.
seconds.
Okay, go ahead.
So all I want to do is read out something that Mr. Ruchir Sharma, who is an advisor to Morgan Stanley, has written. He said, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development says that all 45 economies that it tracks will grow this year. The first time this has happened since 2007, the year before the global financial crisis led to a worldwide recession. Moreover, 3/4 of all countries will grow faster this year than they did last year. India is the slumping minority, with the GDP growth rate now expected to decelerate this year. In the global jobs picture, India
Priyanka,
stands out as even more of a sore thumb. And the RBI governor has categorically revised the growth rate. So these are things that you cannot keep ignoring. You cannot keep ignoring the OECD.
Priyanka, all of us. No, Narendra Taneja, one second. I don't want this to be a BJP Congress debate. I want to get my panelists in. Priyanka, to you, all I'll say is our viewers and all of us have read Ruchir's column in the Times of India. Fair enough. Okay, point noted. I'm going to come back to both of you. Let me take it to Maithili and Anand Narayan, who are sitting patiently. Maithili, to you first. I don't want this to be a BJP Congress debate, so to say. The Prime Minister also said the government is ready to take tough decisions, which will take the economy on the path of development. How are you reading that statement? What does he mean by that? Demonetization, GST, should we prepare ourselves for one more such shock, or is he implying that he is willing to take tough decisions when it comes to structural reforms, the kind that Anand Narayan spoke about a short while ago?
Well, we already have seen the BJP take some pretty tough decisions, because even though one might disagree about the merits or demerits of demonetization, and frankly I don't think the purpose for which the party went in for demonetization, those were served. At least there definitely has been a short-term pain. Let us accept that the government did bite the bullet. It basically antagonized, quote unquote, its own vote banks. So this is a government which has taken tough decisions. It might have made some wrong decisions, but it has not hesitated to take those tough decisions, whether it is RERA, whether it is IBC, whether it is demonetization, whether it is GST. It has taken a number of tough decisions. Any structural reform is going to cause some short-term pain. The only idea is that can we ensure that this pain is not too much and it's as transient as possible. That is where the government's skill shows. At the moment we do not know, but the government has been trying. It has not had very much success going by the first quarter growth, but we'll have to wait and see. Certainly as far as GST is concerned, RERA, IBC are concerned, these were essential reforms. So to that extent I think one cannot fault the government for having done it. Whether it will pay the price in terms of electoral reverses, one will have to wait and see, but for that I think the government is concerned. It is trying to do its best. We'll have to give it the benefit of doubt as things stand today.
Give the government the benefit of doubt. It's not fallen shy of taking tough decisions, and Maithili listed for them. Do you agree with her, Anand Narayan, that on structural reforms the track record of this government isn't so poor after all?
I think to give credit to both the political parties, GST was a brainchild of both of them put together, and they managed to bring it through. And structurally, while it is showing hiccups right now, I think we all agree that in the long run, GST will be good for the country. It makes it one common economic bloc. There is still work to be done. I think all of us will agree here on the show that India needs the investment cycle to come back. We've got an underemployed population, and it's been there historically. And we also have the need to revive investments into education, into rural and urban infrastructure, into water table management, into manufacturing all over again, and low-cost housing. All of this needs to happen. And as Jaggi rightly pointed out earlier, I think one of the stumbling blocks to making sure this investment cycle comes back again is to ensure the financial system is in a position to actually oil the engine and make this, lubricate this engine and get the economy going again. Unfortunately, as things stand today, banks, and the RBI also pointed out today, banks are not necessarily in a position today to lubricate the economy. And I think that's the next big thing which all of us together have to kind of address. How do we make sure banks have the capital, have the wherewithal, have the channel the savings of the country into investment, which can then take us to the next leap forward. That's the debate. There are various options possible. Right. We've had this debate about should we let the fiscal a little loose, get that to pump prime the economy. Right. That's again, it's got lots of pros and cons, and we can debate that separately. Okay. But we need those ideas.
Jaggi, I'm going to come to you, and the question that I asked Maithili a short while ago was, how to interpret the statement saying government ready to take tough decisions which will take economy to the path of development. Now, I heard that entire speech, and I'm not able to make my mind on whether he gave any clues on what's he going to do as far as the stimulus is he concerned. Is he trying to prepare us by talking up the economy? Is he trying to temper expectations on a stimulus? Or is he indicating that, look, I will not fall shy from taking a bold decision if it means I need to slip on the fiscal deficit, so be it. How did you read that speech as far as signals are concerned on a likely stimulus package?
Quite obviously, he's trying to dispel the gloom which has set in and which the opposition is trying to capitalize on. So it was a political statement to say, look, we can take the right decisions. One blip in 1 or 2 quarters is not going to set us back too often, and we will take the bold decisions. The problem is the bold decisions that need to be taken, which will get the Indian economy really out of the ditch, cannot be done even by a majority government. What do you need? You need factor reforms, which is in labor, land. And you need privatization so that a lot of the public sector, which is now soaking in taxpayer money, can be freed up for using more important things in education and health. But that's exactly what is not possible, and I don't think even the Congress will promise any kind of support. So to keep harping on the majority government, that is only as far as the budgets and financial things are concerned. The more structural reforms need a broader consensus, which don't exist right now, and just before an election you're not going to get them. So hard decisions, I don't see what, except for a stimulus, unless he calls that a hard decision, because it will mean busting the fiscal deficit target. I don't see any other hard decisions coming between now and May 2019.
Narendra Taneja, what are the hard decisions that we should expect from the government? Like Jaggi is saying, hard decisions is moving on factor reforms, but on land acquisition bill, your government moved after coming to power. One comment from Rahul Gandhi calling this a soot boot ki sarkar, and that was the end of the matter. We haven't seen any movement on labor, on land reforms, on labor reforms, the kind that will sort of kickstart the private investment cycle, which, as Anant was pointing out, is the single biggest factor that's in the way of rapid economic growth. So what are the hard decisions that the government now intends to take? Could you give us some color on what they could be?
Well, just look at the economic history of India since we came to power. Demonetization was a hard and tough decision. We took that decision at a very high risk, but in the interest of India's economy and in the interest of India's people. GST again, we pushed it forward, and you'll see the result now. And even now, when you launch something like such a big thing, like a reform like GST, you go through certain initial, rough patches, and we are going through that. But in the interest of the country, in the interest of the economy, we have done that. And similarly, when you go for rural economy, which the business newspapers are not much focusing on, we are transforming the economy of rural India systematically. And in a very structured way, major structural reforms are going across the country in the in the rural parts. So I think that's a very bold and very tough decision. Similarly, the point is very clear. Look, the way Congress party used to look at economy is very different from the way we look at it. We want honesty, we want transparency, and we want economy that serves the poor people of this country, at the same time help us expand the economy and modernize the economy. We want to see India a $20 trillion economy as soon as we can. That's our dream. And we are doing it for the country, for the, you know, for the poor people. And we're not really slave of any political ideology for that, like the Congress was for, you know, socialism and so on and so forth. So point here is that, you know, we look at economy with a very different, you know, with different way. We look at economy keeping the ordinary people, keeping the poor people at the very center of it, and then working backward. At the same time, we are rapidly modernizing the economy. Wherever we you know, identify, we find cancerous cells, we don't leave it for tomorrow, we attack them immediately. We don't worry about the political risk that we are taking, that we might lose some support, you know, in our political base and all that, but we attack that. And one quick, the last point I want to make is, the Prime Minister talked about one thing very important. He said public sector, private sector, and the personal sector. That's a very important change, and I think it's important to focus on that, because that basically, this thing, personal sector, what exactly it means in terms of reforming India's economy, the way economy some people see since independence.
You know, like Maitri pointed out, no one can take away the fact that the Prime Minister is an outstanding communicator. So, you know, personal sector was another good introduction to common language now, if I may say. So, but Priyanka Chaturvedi, you know, Narendra Taneja isn't answering my specific question on the tough decision that this government will take or hopes to take or can take. Why don't you sort of give us an indication of what are the tough decisions that the Congress will support this government if it were to take? Will the Congress support this government if it were to privatize Air India? Will the Congress support this government if it were to move on land or labor reforms? Will the Congress support this government if it were to, you know, if it were to move on GST rates, if it were to bring petroleum products under the GST net? Will the Congress support this government if it were to consolidate the GST rates into just three into just three categories?
See, that's if you remember correctly, when P. Chidambaram was speaking in the Rajya Sabha, he had made a pitch for bringing petroleum products, alcohol, everything inside the entire GST component. And the only reason why we kept talking about it back and forth was because of the multiple layers of GST that they were rolling out without having structures in place. And having said that, we saw how it has impacted our small traders throughout the country and how it's impacting. Now, someone was talking about the first quarter growth post GST. Let's not even look at this first quarter growth. Let's look at the past 6 quarters. The growth rate has only been declining consistently. So whether it is the GST, which was much needed, it was needed 10 years ago, which we had introduced, getting blocked by the Bharatiya Janata Party, which they can claim credit for, but unfortunately it's a flawed GST. The other point being that the Prime Minister has agreed that if there are any flaws, he is willing to look at it. The second point being about how they will revive the economy. Now, something that firstly the Prime Minister and his cabinet needs to understand that the economy is in a problem. They cannot keep talking about, you know, the Prime Minister comes and makes his political points, others in the BJP come and make their political points. You have the Finance Minister not specifically answer questions that Mr. Yashwant Sinha raised, Mr. Arun Shourie raised, or various other people from within their party have raised. So this is a cause for concern. First, the acceptance needs to come in that some policies that were introduced have not worked in favor of the country's growing economy and not worked in favor of creating jobs for our young population. So demonetization may be the hard reform or the he bit the bullet, or etc., the structural reform that everyone's claiming. However, was this the only way to digitize the country is something that is out there for people to understand. Was that the only way? Did it achieve the purpose that the Prime Minister stated on the 8th of November? Having said that, this is whatever the Prime Minister, considering economy, it does not concern political, look at ideologies, it has to look at the people at large. If there is something positive that they can bring in terms of policy decision spaces, we would support the government, but it has to help the people at the bottom right up to every person in the country that matters. So this is something which we are willing to support. However, the initiative needs to come from the government.
Sure, but I'm happy to hear you, and yesterday also where the Congress spokesperson tell us that the Congress would support a move to bring petroleum products under the GST net. I wonder if chief ministers of Congress ruled states will agree with you. I wonder if chief ministers of BJP ruled states will also agree with you. But Maithili, on GST, because that's one of the causes of some short-term pain in the economy, and the Prime Minister seemed to indicate that he's willing to course correct. He said categorically the government's willingness to course correct, emphatically stated, have asked the GST Council to review bottlenecks and resolve issues. We've seen the finance minister also just today in Dhaka make a similar pitch. Do you think the government knows that GST is an issue on which they need to soothe a little bit of frayed nerves, take care of the concerns of exporters, maybe make reduce compliance costs for small and medium enterprises? Is that something that the government is going to move on quickly?
Well, the government doesn't have too much of elbow room on GST for the simple reason that if the structure is complex, it's mainly because the GST Council has kept it like that. It is very difficult to get agreement among so many states. So, to that extent, with each state wanting some tweak here, some tweak there, I think what we have today is the result of compromises made in a federation like ours. So, the government's flexibility in those areas is limited to implementation, things like the GSTN. How can you improve the network? How can you improve the speed at which the invoices can be processed, whether you have this kind of matching of invoices, whether procedurally you can make changes. I think that is where the government can play a role. As far as rates are concerned, as far as exemptions are concerned, this is something that is really outside the central government's domain. It is within the GST Council. And the fact is, Sandeep, that every political party, when it is in power, it tends to look at things with rose-tinted glasses. And the same party, when it's in opposition, tends to see this very same things with a jaundiced eye. This is true of the BJP, this was true of the Congress. So I think it's understandable that today the BJP, when it's at power, wants to look at things with rose-tinted glasses, and the Congress completely with jaundiced eyes. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. So the economy is not doing as well as it could, as well as it should. But is it doing better than before? Yes, certainly it is doing better than before if you look at the UPA 2 regime. So as I said, the complications are there are problems in a complex federation, but certainly we are growing way below our potential, and that is where the government should focus on. And I agree completely with Jaggi that what we need to do is look at the banks, get credit flowing again to the corporate sector, and focus on jobs. If we can do these two things, then I think we certainly can say the battle has been, if not completely won, almost won.
On jobs, Anant, I'm coming to you, but on jobs, Narendra Taneja, that's the one key area that the government needs to move on. Priyanka Chaturvedi made that point as well. Jaggi and Maithili both are making the point as well. Is there a plan of action as far as, I know a task force has been formed under the Niti Aayog Vice Chairman Dr. Rajiv Kumar, but is there a plan of action on as far as job creation is concerned? Manufacturing sector, like the RBI pointed out as well, is growing at its lowest in 2 decades. You can't just blame this on global manufacturing, and robotics and automation taking over, because if that were the case, Bangladesh and Vietnam wouldn't be exporting, goods the way they are. So you can't just blame everything on robotics and artificial intelligence and whatnot. What is the plan of action as far as jobs is concerned? Is there an acknowledgement that this is a crisis that needs to be fixed?
No, I never said that robotics are, are the main culprit. No. I always said that when manufacturing is going through a transition, and that's the debate world over. When you're talking of textile exports from Vietnam and Bangladesh, just dig deeper and you will know why textile exports are suffering today. The policy, whatever the policy was there in UPA 1, UPA 2, especially when it comes to UPA 2, and the result is there for everybody to see. Now, but the important point to answer your question, that initiative that we are taking, or the plan of action, yes, absolutely. As I said, 3 folds basically. Number 1 is to strengthen, restructure rural economy so that people can find jobs there where they live, in their village preferably. That's why, taking renewable energy there, solar and power, connection there, that's part of the whole plan. And at the same time, skill development story across the country in the rural economy. We are transforming the rural economy gradually. If you go to rural areas, you will see, examples of that practically everywhere. Number 2, when it comes to, we are promoting as a personal sector, and we are promoting entrepreneurship. That's a major transformation happening, because since the 50s, India was basically, it was socialism everywhere, and nothing wrong with socialism, but the kind of socialism where we basically discourage people from taking any kind of initiative. We said, look, the government is my baab, look up to the government, and we will give you the job. So we are changing that. It's a tough job, but we are doing seeing that results are there and the promising good results are there. And the Prime Minister, when he was talking about the Mudra numbers, basically he was referring to do.
Okay.
Number 3, when it comes to the conventional manufacturing, we know that conventional manufacturing includes textile also that you refer to, and that's an area of focus for us, and lot of work is being done. Wait for the next quarter and the following quarter. You will see also that in terms of GDP, and for this fiscal year also, we will touch overall GDP 7%, if not 6.9%. Trust me, that's the kind of objective
6.9% or 7%.
and we will deliver on that.
Okay, we will deliver 6.9 to 7%. But, 1%, point noted, let me now come to Anand Narayan. The one institution that's not going to help get to 6.9 or 7% or not is the RBI, because I think if anyone had any doubt, today all those doubts have been sort of put to rest. If you heard the fine print of the RBI policy, Anand Narayan, it's very clear. The context of today's speech of the Prime Minister also comes just hours after the RBI made it very clear, boss, we have nothing to do with growth. So for industry that was expecting 100 bips rate cut, 50 bips rate cut, it all seems like a joke right now, Anand Narayan. 25 basis points is also not happening, not today, and I don't think it's happening in all of this financial year for sure. Do you agree with that assessment?
Sandeep, yes and no. So look, maybe, just maybe, RBI missed the bus on rate cuts earlier. There was probably a time earlier this year when inflation was on the lower side, when the global tailwinds were pretty strong as well, when we could have been a little more relaxed on rates, especially in the short end of the curve. But today, if you look at the context, it isn't that clear anymore. Yes, there is a slowdown. There is, GDP for the first quarter of this particular fiscal wasn't great. And even now, credit offtake is pretty soft. Banks are in bad shape. Corporates require some help. So yes, we are clamoring for rate cuts from that perspective. But look at the other side from a longer term perspective. One, we have question marks on how the fisc will look like between now and end of the year. We still don't know whether there's a package coming. At 6% across states and the center put together, we aren't necessarily tight on the fiscal policy. We are pretty loose as it is. Second, the global context is a lot more murky now than it was 6 months ago. The US is now talking about unwinding its quantitative easing. We've got a tax plan coming from the Trump administration, which might actually be fiscally expansionary. And you've got rate hikes possibly coming in as early as December in the US. And a lot of major central banks are talking about rate hikes right now. Third, because your post-tax returns on banking deposits have come down as much, we've got a lot of money going into capital markets in India. While we celebrate the diversion of savings into financial assets, which is great, the reality is we're also uncomfortable with the kind of valuations we are seeing in stock markets and in bond markets. Right. And that's largely because you and I are no longer putting money into 3-year bank deposit. That doesn't make sense. On a post-tax basis, it's far better putting it into an equity mutual fund or a debt mutual fund. Now, all of these put together tell you that at the long end, maybe there's less room for rates to come down. Yes, there is room for rates to come down in the short end, given where rupee is and given where banking health is and corporate health is. So ideally, you would want a steep curve where the short end of the curve is kind of low and longer end of the curve is on the higher side. But doing a rate cut today would frankly give the wrong signal, particularly with so many of uncertainties going forward. Okay,
Jaggi, do you agree with Anand there? Doing a rate cut today would have sent a wrong signal, or do you think, look at the inflation projection, worst case 4.6%, that range is 2 to 6%. Are we just sort of, does the RBI have sort of these blinkers on saying, I will not move beyond? Maithili was making this point earlier this afternoon as well. Are you at one level outraged by the fact that this is, the RBI just seems to be oblivious to the slowdown pressure in the economy?
Yeah, I believe that the RBI has read its inflation mandate in a very, very narrow and risk-averse way. Okay, you have a range between 2 to 6%, and even in its current forecast, it's not seeing more than 4.6%. So I don't see any reason when you have lowered your growth forecast, why you should not be lowering your interest rates. That is one point. The second thing is, even assuming that some adverse events push the rate beyond 6%, remember, the inflation mandate very clearly says that the RBI can overshoot it for 3 consecutive quarters, that is 9 months. It has 9 months when it exceeds 6%, that is when its monetary policy would have failed, which means that it has a lot of time to correct it, assuming the inflation rate hits 6% in any particular month, and it can change its policies. But it is actually shooting itself in the foot well in advance when it's not even touched 4%.
Right.
So what you're doing is you're actually creating a problem. After lowering a growth rate, you're actually not cutting rates. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. Growth is as much as of a mandate. Now it's actually too narrowly focused on only one aspect of inflation, which is wrong.
Right. Maitri, comment on that. Do you agree with Jaggi, or do you go with Anand's view that, you know, there was limited space in this particular policy to cut rates and that we're being too critical of the RBI and expecting it to have cut rates? And finally, one quick question to add to that. We're running out of time. If a fiscal stimulus is not sure if that's going to happen, monetary stimulus is definitely not going to happen, what's going to kickstart the economy?
Well, that last question is going to be very tough. But let me just stick to your first question, and I say I agree with both Anand as well as with Jaggi. I agree with Anand that the RBI lost an opportunity earlier. It had a much better opportunity earlier. Today, that window of opportunity was much, much less. So, even so, it could have taken the risk, because the risk, what is the risk? In August, it said that the inflation trajectory for the second half was between 4 and 4.5%. Now, it has moved that upwards from 4 to 4.5 to 4.2 to 4.6. So, look at the very slight upward movement. As against 4 to 4.5, it is 4.2 to 4.6. Growth, on the other hand, has slipped from, by its own admission, from estimate of 7.3 to 6.7. So, the drop in growth was far, far worse than the hike in inflation. So, certainly there was a case for the RBI to grab the bull by the horns and cut. It might not have made much difference to credit offtake, but it would have improved the bank balance sheets. It would also have done something to curtail the excess inflow of money from overseas. So, certainly the RBI missed it hugely in the past. Today, it could have taken that risk. It failed. It failed because it looked, as Jaggi said, at its inflation market trajectories, our inflation target far too narrowly. And if we are not getting the RBI to move, certainly the government will have to pitch in, because remember, the government is answerable to the electorate. The RBI is not. The governor knows his job is safe. The Prime Minister does not know. And that, I think, makes a world of difference.
Oh, indeed, it does. Sure does. Priyanka, I'm going to let you have the last word. We are sort of running out of time. You know, let's keep fiscal policy, monetary policy, everything aside. And, you know, the one point which the Prime Minister made today is on this whole atmosphere of gloom and doom. And I would believe the UPA sort of, you know, also had a problem with that. The fact that, you know, this whole atmosphere of gloom and doom got created. Let's keep the politics aside, because at stake is not survival of a government and things like that. At stake are jobs of people. You know, the moment this gloom and doom atmosphere gets created, corporates stop investing, jobs get laid off, people lose their jobs, uncertainty kicks in, people don't spend money. You're in a vicious cycle. So,
no,
would you agree that? Will you take that message constructively and say, let's not spread gloom and doom?
No, 1 second. No, firstly, is this vicious cycle created by the opposition? I'm sorry, it is a fallout of the policies that were introduced by the government. Is this vicious cycle where we see credit growth not rising at a 52-year low, where we see manufacturing falling, we see development growth reducing, economic growth reducing? That is not something that we created. It is something that has come from the government of the day. And it is time the government takes a call on this, that as far as they are concerned, as far as you can blame the RBI, you can blame the governor, Urjit Patel, you can blame just about anybody. But at the end of the day, you are the one responsible simply because you came on a vote of development, on a vote for creating jobs, on a vote for bettering the economy from the previous government.
Okay.
These are promises you made to the electorate, and you would be accountable to the electorate. Your policies are also going to be decided by the electorate on how it has benefited them.
Okay.
So as much as we might want to blame anybody, the opposition, the RBI, etc., at the end of the day, the government is in charge and they are responsible for whatever is happening now and the vicious cycle that we keep talking about.
Okay, point taken. Completely out of time on this edition of India Development Debate. Priyanka Chaturvedi, Narendra Taneja, Anand Narayan for making a debut on the India Development Debate. Jaggi and Maitri, thanks so much for joining us on that fascinating debate. Thanks for being with us right here at